Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're diving into ungrading today.
Ooh, ungrading.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, and I know a lot of you are super curious about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So to really get into it, we've got three really amazing sources lined up.
Right.
The first is this research paper from the University of Dublin. And, these technologists dove into how ungrading could actually be revolutionary for students in higher education who learn in many different ways.
Okay, interesting.
Then we're going to hop over to Denmark.
Right?
And there's a study from there that looks at how business students, those super goal-oriented folks,
Right.
how they handle learning in a system that doesn't have traditional grades.
Uh-huh.
And then lastly, we're going to wrap things up in Chile.
Okay.
This last research paper brings parents and teachers to the table to talk about their experience with ungrading, but in primary school English classes.
Wow. So we're really getting like a global perspective here.
Totally. And I think by looking at all these different angles, it'll give us a much more holistic, well-rounded understanding of this whole ungrading thing.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because our goal today is not just to scratch the surface here.
Right.
We really want to uncover what's exciting about ditching those old school grades, but then also, let's be real.
Yeah.
What about those anxieties that come up when you shake things up like that?
Totally, because we've been living with grades for ever.
I know, right?
Actually, the Dublin paper mentions that these letter grades, the ones we all know and maybe love to hate,
Yeah.
they've been around since the 1600s.
Get out.
Yeah, starting at Harvard.
Wow. The 1600s.
Yeah.
You think by now with all the technology and everything, we would come up with something better.
I know, right? Well, here's the thing. When letter grades became the norm in the early 1900s, it wasn't because they were suddenly this perfect way to measure learning.
Oh, really?
It was more about practicality.
Practicality. Okay, I get it. I mean, everyone loves things to be easier, but at what cost, right?
Yeah, exactly. So more students were going to college, and universities needed a standard way to track everyone and how they were doing. Letter grades just made sense, a common language everyone could understand.
So basically, it was about keeping records neat and tidy more than actually figuring out the best way for people to learn.
Pretty much.
Huh. It's kind of like that saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
But what if it is a little broken or even a lot broken?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And that is exactly why this whole ungrading thing is so fascinating. We have to look at what grades are actually doing and what they might be holding us back from.
I like that. What are they holding us back from? Okay, but before we go any further, what exactly do we mean by ungrading? It's not like classrooms with no rules, right?
No. Yeah, definitely not. The way those Dublin researchers explain it, ungrading is really about shifting away from traditional grades as the main way to measure if someone's learning. Think of a classroom where the focus is on giving students detailed feedback, helping them learn how to assess their own work, and really building those skills to keep learning your whole life that's ungrading.
Okay, lifelong learning habits. I love that. But we have to talk about the elephant in the room. How can students really learn and grow if you take away that carrot dangling in front of them, the good old grade?
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? We all want that validation, whether it's oh, I crushed that test, or even just that little dopamine hit you get from seeing a good grade,
Totally.
and the flip side, a bad grade.
Oh, yeah.
That can really sting.
For sure. Ungrading is really about getting off that roller coaster of emotions. Instead of chasing after that end result, it's about shifting the focus to the actual learning process itself, the joy of discovery.
I like that. It's about enjoying the journey, not just fixating on the destination. Exactly. And this is where it gets even more interesting. The Dublin paper highlights some ungraded courses where students actually get to grade themselves.
Wait a minute, hold on. Students grading themselves. Doesn't that just mean everyone's going to give themselves an A+? How does that even work?
I know, right? It sounds kind of crazy at first, and it's a fair question, but the research suggests that it's not about just letting students decide their own grades. There's actually a lot of trust involved and a really clear structure.
Okay, so tell me more.
So from the very beginning, students are super involved in figuring out what they want to learn. They keep track of their progress, think about how they're doing, and they're not just doing this all alone in a vacuum.
So there's accountability. It's not a free-for-all.
Not at all. There are clear guidelines they use. They give each other feedback, which can be super helpful. And they even get to sit down one-on-one with the teacher to talk about their self-assessment. So it's really a team effort.
That makes a lot more sense. It's about helping them learn how to understand their own learning, to take charge of it.
Exactly. And the research suggests that this can be seriously empowering. Imagine feeling like your voice actually matters, like you have a say in how your progress is being measured. That's pretty motivating.
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, this is your journey, and you have the power to shape it.
Exactly. And when students really feel that ownership, they're more likely to be truly invested. They're not just memorizing stuff to get a good grade on a test. They're actually grappling with the material on a deeper level.
Instead of chasing the A, they're motivated by that desire to learn, to actually grow.
Yes. And it takes us back to those lifelong learning habits we talked about. When you learn those self-assessment skills early on, you're set. You're ready to learn and adapt no matter what life throws at you.
It's true, and that's something that traditional grading, with all its focus on getting that external validation, often misses. Okay, so this all sounds really promising, but I know there's more to this ungrading thing. What about that Danish study, the one with the business students? Weren't they known for being a pretty ambitious bunch? How do students like that handle a system without grades?
Well, that's what makes that study so interesting. Business students have this reputation for being super focused on outcomes, right?
Hmm.
Good grades,
Huh.
the perfect internships, high-paying jobs, that kind of thing.
Right, they've got their eyes on the prize.
Exactly. So how do they handle this system that challenges all those traditional ideas of success? Well, the researchers found what they call a gradeless paradox.
A paradox. Okay, now you've got me really curious. Tell me more.
So on the one hand, when grades were taken out of the equation, these students felt a sense of relief. Less pressure, more freedom. I mean, who wouldn't want that, right?
Totally.
But at the same time, they also started feeling this different kind of anxiety.
So it's like, woohoo, no grades. But also, wait, how do I know if I'm doing a good job?
Exactly. It's this weird tension between feeling free from the pressure of grades, but also feeling a little lost without them.
Because those benchmarks are familiar.
Exactly. And it led to some interesting stuff, like students were way more comfortable diving deep into topics they were passionate about. They took more risks, explored more, because there wasn't that fear of getting a bad grade hanging over them.
Yeah, it's like if a grade's not on the line, I can just follow my curiosity.
Exactly. But, and here's the flip side of that paradox, some students admitted that kind of checked out of classes they weren't as into. Without that external motivation of a grade, it was harder to stay engaged.
Oh, that classic struggle intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Right. And what this study found was that even for these super ambitious business students, that internal drive, that love of learning, wasn't always enough, especially for courses they didn't see as relevant to their career goals.
Makes sense. It's like if it's not going on my resume, why bother?
And that's the thing, it shows how ingrained those beliefs about grades and success are. Even when we get why a different approach could be better, it's hard to shake off the system we grew up in. We're wired to think grades equal success, equal self-worth. It's deep.
Which brings us to that really big question. If not grades, then what? What's the alternative? How do we measure learning in a way that truly shows individual growth and progress, not just how well someone can memorize facts or ace a test? And that's where our third study, the one from Chile, comes in. It takes us into the world of primary school English classes and brings parents into the conversation.
And that's huge, because let's be real, no conversation about education is complete without hearing from parents and teachers. They're right there with the students, living this system every day.
It really is a team effort. So tell me about this Chilean study. What made the researchers want to get the parents' perspective, especially in primary school?
Well, you know how it is. Primary schools where a lot of those ideas about grades and future success, they really start to stick, right?
Yeah.
And parents, obviously, they want what's best for their kids.
Of course.
They want them to succeed. And in a lot of cultures, success is all about, well, academic achievement,
Right.
which often comes down to, you guessed it, grades.
It's that whole good grades open doors thing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And when you throw English into the mix, those beliefs can get even stronger, especially in our globalized world.
Because then English becomes this like commodity, this
Yeah.
key to opportunity.
That's exactly what they found.
Yeah.
A lot of the parents in the study, they really saw English fluency as a ticket to a brighter future, better jobs, higher salaries, you name it.
Yeah, it's like if my kid speaks English, they'll have a leg up in the world.
Totally. And here's where it gets interesting. This study found that ungrading, while it could challenge that whole English equals success equation,
Okay.
it could also actually reinforce it in some ways.
Wait, really? How so? How can it do both?
Well, even though parents recognized that ungrading helped their kids feel less stressed in the moment, they still worried about the future.
Makes sense.
They were worried that without those traditional grades on a report card, Their kids' English skills wouldn't be taken seriously by high schools or universities or even employers later on.
It's that tension again, short-term relief versus those long-term anxieties.
Exactly. And it just goes to show how deeply rooted those beliefs about education and success really are. It's not just about changing how we grade, it's about changing how we think.
It's a mindset shift.
Yes, it's about challenging what it even means to be successful in school and just in life.
That is a really powerful point. It goes way beyond just a grade on a report card.
For sure. And it's a conversation that needs to include everyone, teachers, policymakers, parents, students, everybody. We have to ask ourselves, what do we value in education? Is it about memorizing a bunch of facts just to get a good grade? Or is it about fostering a genuine love of learning, a curiosity about the world, about being able to think critically?
That's what it's really about, right? So we've talked about a lot. The history of grades, what's potentially awesome about ungrading, the anxieties that come up. We've looked at it from the student's perspective, from the parent's perspective, the teacher's perspective. And I think what really stands out to me is how all these research papers, even though they're looking at different situations, they all come back to that same question. If not grades, then what?
It's the million-dollar question, right? And there's no easy answer. But I think the big takeaway is this. Ungrading, on its own, it's not a magic solution.
Right.
You can't just throw out grades and expect everything to be amazing. It's got to be about a much bigger change in how we think about learning and assessment.
It's about creating a learning environment that puts students at the center, where we celebrate each person's growth and encourage them to take ownership of their learning, and where we equip them with those essential skills, critical thinking, self-reflection, and yes, a genuine love for learning that'll serve them well no matter what path they choose in life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And it needs open communication, a willingness to try new things, and a shared commitment to reimagining what education could be.
And that is the perfect note to end on. If not grades, then what? It's a question worth thinking about. We want to hear from you. Let us know what resonated with you, what you're thinking about. Hit us up on social media. And until next time, keep those minds curious.